Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news, which as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. With any luck, you're having an amazing day. We have lots of news to get through in this particular video. But I would like to start the video out with a quick announcement. In the next day or two, I will be plonking on the YouTube channel an interview with AdShare, who are of course the company responsible for creating a local ray. I actually had an interview with the CEO of the company. It was really enlightening. He actually hinted that the current generation consoles with their technology could actually benefit from using local ray to be able to produce visuals that would not be as good, of course, as the next generation consoles, but still would have some type of ray tracing support, which was really interesting. And obviously, we go a lot more detailed with that whole topic in the video. So if you are interested in that, then I'd encourage you, of course, to subscribe and check back. And the company does also have a console vendor that they're apparently doing business with, but he wasn't able to provide that information. So hopefully I will be able to follow up with him in a future interview. We're probably going to schedule that in several months when the all the announcements become official, but still we do go into quite a lot of detail of how their local ray software does work, and it's definitely worth checking out. So, as I said, that interview will be up in the next 2 days or so. I just need to do the editing for it, and they're sending over a couple of technical slides. But anyway, getting into the news topics themselves, I'd like to begin with AMD, specifically Kamachi on Twitter, link of course in the description of the video, has discovered a small thing with Renault, with the Renault FP6 processor. It supports PCIe 3.0 with a x8 interface. This is not a particularly major crippling thing regarding the CPU, or actually technically it's an APU, simply because of course this is not something that is necessarily going to be plonked into your system and attached to 1 million different SSDs. But keeping on the theme of AMD, there's actually been a couple of official announcements. One of them is that there are a couple of updated SKUs in the Epyc lineup. I'm going to breeze through this news fairly quickly because I realize many of you are not exactly server admins. But even so, there is the 7662 chip. It's 64 cores, 128 threads. And the clock frequency here is basically slightly lower than the other chips like the 7H12, so the base frequency is just 2 GHz, for example. The TDP, however, is a little bit lower. It's only 225 watts. There is also the 7532, which has 32 cores and 64 threads, and its TDP is 200 watts as well, with a base frequency of 2.4 and a boost frequency of 3.3. So you may say to yourself, well, what's the big deal here? Why does that chip really merit any release? Well, the reason is because while the other 32-core, 64-thread processors would have only, I say only, it's ridiculous for me to say only, 128 megabytes of level 3 cache. Here we have 256 megabytes of level 3 cache. So this is basically for applications which really require additional cache on the processor. So what essentially is happening is all 8 CCDs are essentially connected to the chiplet, but the cores and threads themselves have been disabled, but the rest of the active CPU cores, if that makes any sense, are able to access the level 3 cache. And finally, AMD themselves have managed to snag a very lucrative contract, actually 2 lucrative contracts. The first is that they are going to be providing the Epyc processors in the US Navy Department Defense supercomputer, and this is going to have a 12.8 petaflop of compute horsepower in it, and this is for a combination of AMD's Epyc processors as well as NVIDIA's Volta GPUs. And on top of that, we can expect to see 290,304 of these CPUs together with 112 NVIDIA Volta GPUs. So if that's not crazy enough for you, they've installed a bit of memory with it, 590 terabytes. So that's a lot. Just to be clear here, that is CPU cores with the 290-odd thousand. So the actual number of processors is 4,536. But that is kind of crazy because we're looking at way over 500,000 threads on this thing. Furthermore, Google, being Google, want as much compute horsepower as possible, and so they are going to be leveraging Epyc processors as well, and we're going to be seeing N2D VMs on the Google Compute engines powered by Rome, and they're stating that it could be up to around a 39% performance improvement on CoreMark, and it could be a 13% improvement over the N series. And taking a hop, a skip, and a jump over to Intel, and we have news concerning Xe as well as the 10th generation processors. The Intel Xe graphics will actually support 12-bit HEVC/VP9 decoding. This has been discovered by Foreign-X, of course, once again, link in the video description. And I'm going to read this out verbatim, a small snippet from their article. The documentation for Intel's open source media driver that exposes VA API capabilities on the Linux desktop was recently updated. That updated Intel VA API media driver supports the Intel's Gen 12, dropping VP8 video capabilities, but expanding it when it comes to 12-bit codec support. Now, if you remember, there were a lot of rumors prior to when we kind of really had any solid information from Intel themselves that originally, kind of before Raja Koduri even touched the architecture, that basically Intel were originally creating an accelerator for video decoding and stuff like that. So this, I guess, is kind of a way for them to expand on that. Pretty much it was just kind of like, well, Raja Koduri kept those capabilities, but it looks like they're expanding into many other areas, including, of course, gaming and compute. And honestly, I think Intel are going to have a very interesting product. What concerns me with Intel's Xe GPUs, well, I guess there's a couple of things. One, I wonder what the software stack's going to be like, especially for gaming. Although I will say, Intel's iGPUs, in terms of their drivers, they're pretty damn good. The problem is, of course, with the drivers, the iGPU can't exactly run modern day titles at like 1440p at like 120 FPS, right? But the drivers themselves are pretty pleasing to use, and they have, of course, been really pushing the reinvention of their graphics drivers, and they do look pretty good. But I do wonder what type of performance we're going to see, the pricing situation for us as end users, and also, while video encoding, it's kind of like a niche. Obviously, you've got sites like Netflix, which being able to decode and then send that over to us as end users is kind of important. But you've also got other situations as well in the cloud, and this is definitely something AMD are fighting. When it comes to high-performance computing, they've had several projects going to try and transition people from CUDA. NVIDIA kind of have, I wouldn't say a stranglehold on the market, but they basically were the first to really push high-performance computing. So a couple of people actually wrote back to me in regards to my questions regarding if you're like a data scientist. I was asking what people think of the current situation, and most people just said that CUDA at the moment is just so well known in the industry and so simple to use, you know, for data scientists or for people in high performance computing, that it's going to be challenging for AMD and Intel, of course, to really get a good grip on the market. That's not to say that they can't be competitive. AMD, especially right now, are making really good inroads, but yeah, I guess I'm trying to say that they've got a lot more to improve. And on the subject of Intel, I would like to also give a quick update to their 10th generation processors, which of course are known as their Comet Lake codename. So Comet Lake, we still don't have an exact release date. All we know is they're going to launch at some point or another, which is really helpful. If I had to guess, it's probably going to be around April-ish, but don't quote me on that. That's not from a leak. That's just kind of just throwing a dart at the board and hoping for the best. So it might be March, it might be May, I don't know. But what has been leaked is a couple of things. First of all, a slide from Informatical Zero. I'm probably butchering that name, so I apologise profusely to everyone who is involved. But anyway, we actually have a series of KF variant processors. We actually did tackle a benchmark yesterday, but this is several different SKUs which are KF. Just as a quick reminder, the K indicates an unlocked processor, so you can of course start messing around with the multiplier, because obviously processor clock speed is a function of the front side bus or whatever it is on your particular processor times the multiplier. And then you've got, of course, the F, which essentially means that the graphics are disabled. Now, if you look at the current generation processors, generally you're looking at around $20-30 cheaper for the 9th generation for the F derivatives. And sometimes they also can overclock a little bit more, but it's so minor. Technically as well, in theory, they may also pull a little bit less power, but the iGPU is still present, I believe, with the 10th generation. It's simply going to be disabled. So you're looking at around $20 to $30 cheaper, which is definitely good in some areas. So if you're going to be pairing up one of these CPUs, for example, with a discrete graphics card, which I imagine many of you would want to do, then it's a good way to save a couple of bucks. The only issue is, because you don't have an iGPU, certain workloads, those that require quick sync, so for example Adobe Premiere, can be a little bit slower. And of course, furthermore, you don't have the ability to RMA your graphics card or throw one over to eBay or whatever while you're waiting for the new one, or just be able to do troubleshooting, which is quite nice. Like, it's always nice to be able to just be like, okay, why am I getting a blank screen? Is it the graphics card that's balked? Is it something entirely different? And when you're trying to do a minimal build of the system, honestly, it's quite nice, especially if you just want to throw in like any old crap just to do like a BIOS flash to the motherboard. So yeah, is it worth paying an extra $30 for? Well, that, my friends, is down to you. However, while we're on the subject, there is also a couple of price lists that have actually leaked, and this is kind of interesting because they've been leaked on Slovakian stores. The new processors are comparable. I'll link to a videocards.com article, as they've done a fairly nice write-up based upon Momomo on Twitter. And basically you can see yourself the price comparison between them. You're looking at a small price premium between the 10th and 9th generation processors. Now, of course, the 10th generation does have additional features like, well, hyperthreading in just about every SKU, as well as an increased core count, although what we don't have right now are the higher end SKUs like the 10900, but there is still a price premium there, which is kind of worrying with the 9900K. What I'm hoping is that the price will be adjusted so it's a little bit cheaper than what we are expecting for the higher end. Because honestly, if you are looking at a small price premium over the 9900K for a 10-core 20-thread part, then you're going to be basically bumping up against processors in AMD's lineup like the 3900. And that's not to say that the 3900 is going to be an inferior or a superior product, but I think that yeah, I would just like to see it a little bit cheaper, because I think AMD have a bit more room, to be honest, to do a price cut. So I do suspect that we will see AMD do a price cut if they feel that Intel are being really competitive. From what I understand, the chiplet yields for AMD's processors are actually pretty good. That's not to say that they definitely will have a price cut, but I would not be surprised. And now, the final piece of news, and that is PlayStation will not be attending the PAX East convention because of, well, it's word I can't say because YouTube are going to demonetize the video if I happen to say the word, but you know the thing that I'm talking about. I'm sorry, I literally cannot say the word. YouTube will quite literally demonetize the video if I use the word. We all know what it is. I'm sorry, I just literally can't say it, which is kind of ridiculous, but there you go. Anyway, today, Sony Interactive Entertainment has made the decision to cancel its participation in PAX East in Boston this year due to increasing concerns over the this was an official statement, of course, by PlayStation. We felt this is the safest option. As the situation is changing daily, we are disappointed to cancel our participation in the event. But of course, they pushed the fact that health and safety is of paramount importance. Unfortunately, this was the event that people were really looking forward to because we were going to see a playable demo of The Last of Us 2. And I'm really hoping that Sony makes the decision to actually just release this to the public, or at the very least put lots of footage out there. So it does kind of suck that we literally will have to just keep waiting. Don't forget, Microsoft are not going to be at the conference either, so I suppose in terms of PR wars, they're not really losing, that is Sony, they're not really losing anything from not doing this. Other than, of course, people's frustration of really wanting to play The Last of Us 2, and I honestly really want to play The Last of Us 2 as well. It's easily one of my most hyped and anticipated games this year. Actually, let me know in the comments what your hyped and anticipated games are right now. I'm not going to talk about games that we've seen very little footage of. So, for example, Halo Infinite. I kind of want to play it a lot, but until I see lots of footage, I don't want to put it on the list. But for me, Final Fantasy VII, Resident Evil 3, Last of Us, and the new Doom as well, and Cyberpunk. Those are the games that I'm really super hyped about. So let me know if there's anything that you think I'm missing. There probably is a couple. Anyway, so yeah, it's quite disappointing that we don't get this. So everyone, of course, right now is just waiting for some type of confirmation regarding the PlayStation 5 anyway. So maybe Sony were like, well, we're not quite ready to reveal the system. We weren't going to do it at PAX because of the concerns of, well, the thing. We decided to just kind of hold off and we can save some money anyway. And we know that Microsoft aren't going to be there. So, yeah, we think it's just the best option. Once again, it's frustrating for all involved, including myself, because I really want to see The Last of Us. But while I feel it's frustrating, I can't actually blame Sony for this decision. With all of that said, though, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you did, then of course subscribe to the channel for much more of my rambling, and you can also leave a like on the video because that helps us out a ton. I'd also like to spend just a moment thanking everyone who has been a recent subscriber and people who have been contacting me on Twitter and just kind of interacting. It's absolutely really awesome of you, and I'm kind of humbled actually with the insane response some of my videos have been getting recently. So once again, I'd really like to thank you for that. You can find us, of course, as well linked on social media, which is in the video description, as well as Patreon. If you want to support us, that would be appreciated, but don't feel you do. But anything you do give us helps us, of course, acquire new equipment. Or you can also find Amazon affiliate links if you want to buy yourself, like, I don't know, a new lawnmower. I always use the bloody example of lawnmowers. Anyway, I'm going to let you all go. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.